Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about big business in the industrial age. So, we've learned at this time business is booming, factories are starting to spring up, and they're changing the way that we make products, and new products are being made with new industries. So, some of these new industries and big businesses are making tons of money. So, today we're going to figure out why and how exactly that happened. First of all, we have to understand the government's position in all of this, because that was definitely a big factor in how these companies got so big. So the government in this time approached business in a laissez-faire way. This is a French word that means hands off. For us, what this means is that the government decided not to interfere with businesses. It didn't regulate businesses. It basically said, we'll stay out of your hair because the government wanted the economic growth and the big boom in our economy. We want that new industry because overall it's supposed to help the country, right? So the government says, you know what? We'll keep our hands off. We will even pass laws to protect you, and we will pass taxes to protect big business in America. But we won't regulate you. So we'll let you kind of do your own thing. That is what laissez-faire is all about. What this is going to lead to are monopolies. This whole regulation system that the government comes up with, where they're not regulating, doesn't really work. So the big economic growth that's happening is what's going to lead to these monopolies. A monopoly happens when one company or a group of companies controls the market for one product or service. So when you have a monopoly, you're the only person who is offering or selling something, which means that the consumers, people like you and me who, buy stuff, we can only go to them whenever we want to buy that thing because they're the only ones that are selling it. They control the market, they control their industry, they set their prices, so it can end up becoming kind of a bad thing. Because they can set their own price, or they can set their own prices because they have no competition. No one else is offering this product or service. So they can set it as high as they want to set it because they're the only ones making it. If there is competition between several different companies, it tends to drive prices down because you're trying to get people to buy your stuff instead of the other companies. So if I'm offering something for a lower price, people are going to want to buy my item instead of this item from another company. And it's effectively the same item, but mine is cheaper. So people are going to want to buy it instead. So monopolies can be really damaging for us as people who are buying stuff. And it's not fair to other companies because a monopoly basically squashes any smaller companies that try to come along. So you might be thinking to yourself, maybe monopolies aren't that bad and you want to try to make one yourself. Well, there are kind of three different ways that happened, and I'm going to explain those to you. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, becoming a monopoly, there was a pretty standard way of going about doing that. The first one of those is called a trust. So a trust happens when several big companies come together and they decide to create a group of trustees who pretty much run all of these separate companies as one big one. They're the ones making all of the decisions. So what happens is that competition that they would have had is now gone. So they can now eliminate competition, set their prices really high to earn more profit. And eventually they're going to have control of their market because all of these companies decided to work together and basically form a team. But that gives them complete control and hurts the consumers. Companies could become a monopoly through another thing called horizontal integration, which means they're buying up other companies that do what they do. All right, so horizontal, they're buying other things that make exactly the same thing that they make. So, for example, if I'm a railroad tycoon, okay, I go around and I'm going to buy up other smaller railroad companies to give myself more power and more money. And I'm going to keep buying more railroad companies, okay? And eventually I'm going to have control over everything because I eliminated all of my competition, okay? So I just bought other railroad companies. That's how that makes that horizontal. And I created a monopoly for myself out of that. The third way that businesses could become monopolies is through a thing called vertical integration, which is when you buy up companies that contribute to each step, vertical steps, in the production of whatever you produce. So if I'm a shoemaking company, I need to buy up businesses that make everything that goes into making a shoe. So I'm going to buy this company that makes leather, and this company that makes fabric, and this company that makes rubber, and maybe even a shipping company. So I have all of the things that go into making my shoes and a way to get those out. So everything that goes into making and selling my product, I now have control over, and I can now control my prices more. And normally that means I'm going to jack those prices up so that I'm making more money. Again, that's what a monopoly is all about, is how can I make more money? So, as I mentioned, there is plenty of companies and people who, run those companies who are now becoming super wealthy off of these new methods and not so ethical business practices. Some of those peoples are guys like Andrew Carnegie, John Rockefeller, and Cornelius Vanderbilt. All of these guys justified their prosperity and their growth with an idea called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is a new social idea that comes about at the end of the 1800s that takes Charles Darwin. Ooh, lights went out on me. So, social Darwinism is this idea that takes Charles Darwin's idea of evolution and natural selection. So, only the fittest and strongest and smartest survive. Charles Darwin figured this out researching birds. Okay. Well, what these people who believe in social Darwinism do is they apply that theory that Darwin took and applied to animals, and they're going to apply it to people. Okay. So social Darwinists take this idea and they basically say that these big tycoons and wealthy people are surviving and thriving because they are the fittest. They're the smartest and the strongest and like the best of the best. So, of course, they're the ones who are becoming wealthy and successful and amazing. Okay. So, we're taking this idea again and applying it to society, social Darwinism. Okay. Now, eventually, the government's going to step in when they realize that these big business tycoons have unchecked power in the economy and in politics at this time. They also realize that monopolies hurt people who are buying stuff and other businesses that are trying to sell stuff. So we have to, as consumers, pay high prices when there is a monopoly. And oftentimes the quality is not great because there's no competition with other companies to make better products. So the government passed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. And this act essentially makes these big monopolies combining together to unfairly control the market illegal. Sounds great, right? Really, really hard to enforce that and actually use it as a law and stop businesses from continuing to become monopolies. So in the first couple years that it's around, it's really not very effective at all. But it is a good first step in checking big business and those shady monopolistic practices that they have going on. So hopefully now you understand more about monopolies, how they're formed, and why they were big during this industrial age.